when Film Nation came to us for their deliverable spec, they wanted their P3 theatrical version, but they also had an HDR version thrown on the back end that they wanted. And had we not sort of communicated early on, then I wouldn't have had the time in that while they were shooting and while they were cutting to sort of build those tools to be able to deliver pretty quickly within our color time. That I was able to color the P3 theatrical with Matt, in a week and a half or so time. And then the next day he came back and we were looking at the HDR version the next day. So I was able to change out all the LUTs and have that pre-built prior to us working together.
The thing about the HDR too is like I was a little nervous about it. I've done it on bigger movies, but we took like a week and a half to manipulate everything because it really changed the way you look at stuff. Because if you're watching on standard television now or standard HD television, you're accustomed to that feel, right? And then you suddenly step into an HDR suite or an HDR, or just a HDR television, and it literally hurts your eyes. I mean, literally, the whites can just like go, it's like just blind you. And I, as a DP, I try to deal in subtlety. It's not very subtle when you step in there, right? Well, you can't just plug this stuff in. With what, and one of the things I was concerned about was what Dan talked about with the lenses and because I think, as Brandon said, we all try right now. We try to break these things down, right? Because everything's too perfect. It's like if you go with you, we're a species that sees round, and this is an element that sees squares, and so we're trying to constantly break down something like that. So taking it to a more exponential level with HDR I was like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And so I was concerned about using these older lenses, and are the aberrations going to be the same? Aberrations going to be the same, or is what's going to happen? Like we had this 20 millimeter lens that one of the things Dan did, I mean, first of all, he emptied out the freaking closet for me, literally, and because I tested old Baltars, these like great old lenses from 60s and 70s, Rochester, New York, right? Bausch and Lomb.
Yeah.
And then to the Zeisses and I used the ultra speed and super speeds, the Cooks. All these things have different looks to them, and there's this great 20 millimeter, I think it was the ultra speed I don't know what was up with it, but the right side just sort of floated off, and so I knew we had we're gonna have these really nice like big shots out in New York, and everything's very linear, right? And so to try and create an organic sense of that, so the left side of the frame is like sharp and just straight on, and then it just sort of drifts into something, which is it's a certain point where they find out that. Spoiler alert, when they find out that Emma has done something or Catherine has done something wrong, and they all come back together. It was like that was a way to tell the story with that, and I was concerned about the HDR pass for that. Is that going to like take that away? And with what we were able to do, Dan assured me that we would still be there. It was just a matter of making it work for my eyes at that point. So.
What's really interesting about HDR is it kind of caught me off guard, but back to the psychology and the anatomically how we're programmed to pick up on lights as a survival guide is HDR is a luminance change. We're already using part of the vision that's not necessarily programmed to accept it. So when we use the HDR, we have gains, it automatically reprograms our brain. It does a self-calibration as it is, but when we take advantage of the HDR, it actually creates luminance that forces the audience to be focused back on the image. And a lot of what we're noticing, the technologies of the later or the older lenses are very amenable to the HDR process because they allow for the glares, which give the impression of a wrap. So again, once you put a wrap around someone, it makes a difference of a image looking like it was from an NFL football game where everything's flat and in focus to enveloping the object and pulling them in the screen and makes it immersive. So when you use a gain that's higher than your eye sees, our brain's going to recalibrate to the HDR and with the help of post-production of tuning it down. Because remember, HDR, you're given a 5-gallon bucket of luminance. You don't have to fill it to the top. But if you play on the top edge of that bucket to create a luminance change, you're forcing your audience to re-engage and look at the show. So you're more likely to successfully keep your audience enticed in the show.